Cell 1 is the first story in the Thing Around Your Neck anthology. It's mainly about Namabia, the spoiled son of a university professor, and his development from a reckless troublemaker to a mature young man who's willing to sacrifice his safety for another. The point of transformation takes place when he's arrested and placed in Nigerian prison and witnesses the corruption and brutality of the policemen. The story is narrated by his nameless younger sister. While the story doesn't name the exact city, its events clearly take place within a middle-class to upper-class Nigerian academic community, likely based on Nsukka, where Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie herself studied and often sets her work. I'm going to talk about two literary devices from the story, and I aim to do this at a greater depth than you'll need to engage with for your FEA, but it should be a useful study resource nonetheless. So in this video, I'll deep dive into the way Adichie uses different spaces as staging points for exploring power and privilege. In the next video, I'll talk about the role of the narrator and how her viewpoint shapes our understanding of the themes in the story. These devices give us insight into how Adichie frames gender, class, and justice in Nigerian society in her stories. You can choose literary devices from the text to support a thesis. Space is a great one to look at. In literary works, space acts as a crucial device. Different spaces occupied by characters can influence the narrative, character development, and theme. But we're not just talking about settings, but space as an element that can symbolize abstract concepts like power, social hierarchies, the psychological state of a character, or cultural values. Any of Adichie's stories can be explored through this lens. Spaces in Cell 1 and how they might represent different ideas. In particular, the university, the family home, and the prison all have a distinct feeling and a place in the story. We know that they're meaningful, and we know that Cell 1 itself, as in the literal cell, is clearly an important space because it's the title of the story. So a good way to think about space when critically analyzing literary texts is to think about how is the space described? Who has the power here? Who is excluded and treated unfairly? What might the space represent? How do these settings connect to bigger ideas like class, gender, and justice? Cell Block 1, and the ways they're described and the ways that characters exist in them and move through them have a lot to say about class, gender, and justice. You can see this immediately in the way the university is described. Firstly, as a cultivated space for middle-class male academics and their privileged sons, and then as a site of chaos when the young men's behavior is indulged and escalates. The jail, including Cell Block 1 itself, is also really important, as this is where Namabia has his reality check and total change of character. It's a place that exposes corruption of the family and their bribes and of the police officers, a place where the wealthy and privileged professor loses control of the situation, and where the injustices of the Nigerian police state are demonstrated. For Namabia, it's a site of transformation, where he responds to the mistreatment of the old man by rejecting his blind privilege and troublemaking ways and developing his own consciousness. The university where Namabia and his father work and study is portrayed as a secluded place, a slow insular campus in a slower, more insular town. In other words, the campus is described as a largely homogeneous space where workers and students who belong to the middle class are kept away from the outer world. Here, the male professors, who are fully aware of the thefts committed by their sons, turn a blind eye and instead cast aspersions upon what must be riffraff from town. The description of the campus as sacred emphasizes the arrogance of the professors, who indulge and protect their thieving sons while safeguarding the space from those they view as inferior. This image of the university as a respectable educational institution with certain codes of ethics is juxtaposed by the uncontrolled violence and murder which erupts as the young man's actions escalate from petty theft to forming cults. This space is hostile even to women of the same social backgrounds, who are forced to stay inside their hostel rooms after classes to avoid being victimized by street violence. In a space where young men are empowered and protected silently by institutions, even educated and middle-class female academics are unsafe. For example, the cult boys waylay a female professor while she's driving. Similarly, Namabia's cousin, Adichie, a beautiful young woman who is wealthy enough to own 2 cell phones, is harassed by police officers who call her a terrible name and ask her for so much money that she kneels on the ground in the rain begging them to let her go. Home is presented as another sheltered and privileged space. The imagery of the bougainvillea sprawled over the low fence creates an image of beauty, comfort, and order. It's not just a physical space, It symbolizes the family's denial and commitment to keeping up appearances, especially in the mother's case. When Namabia steals his mother's gold jewelry and stages a break-in, the family's quick to assume the house was burgled by outsiders, again shifting the blame to riffraff from town. The narrator, of course, knows better. She says, "It took me a moment to understand, to take in the scattered room. Even then I felt that there was a theatrical quality to the way the drawers were flung open. Or perhaps it was simply that I knew my brother too well." And yet, despite her intelligence and keen observational eye, she's often excluded from the family. The home is a space where she lacks agency. She's powerless and ignored. When Namabia confesses, she is so infuriated by her mother's reaction that she wanted to slap her. The family's willful ignorance of Namabia's actions appears to be because, as the male child, he's the emotional center of the family. In this way, the home mirrors the university, indulging and preserving male privilege at the expense of women. Jail is depicted as a space of corruption, powerlessness, and class-based injustice. At first, Namabia's father attempts to use his position and resources to shield his son from the harsh realities of the prison system. He drove to the police station every day, bringing food and slipping money to the officers. These bribes temporarily afford Namabia protection. So Namabia would not be beaten, so he would be allowed to eat the food we brought, so he would not be crammed into the cell that held hardened criminals. Justice here in the prison system is completely transactional. Basic human rights like food, safety, and visitation are conditional and granted only when accompanied by wealth and influence. Stop working. Cell 1's introduced as a place of fear. Cell 1 was where they put the hardened criminals, the gang members, the robbers. Stories about Cell 1, like a boy who was shot in the arm and left to die slowly as his arm turned a shiny black, highlight the unpredictable and excessive cruelty of the police officers. Cell 1 is almost a torture place. Inexplicably, Namabia is moved to Cell 1. The family doesn't know why, and this move shows that despite their privilege, they're still helpless when faced with a corrupt justice system, a police state where officers have absolute power and can exercise it violently and arbitrarily, seemingly on a whim. The setting contrasts sharply with the university and the family home. While those spaces offer protection and privilege, the prison strips Namabia of his status and forces him to witness suffering he can't ignore. It is only in Cell 1 that Namabia truly faces the realities of corruption and injustice in the dictatorial police state of Nigeria. The old man's mistreatment in Cell 1 marks the shift in Namabia's character. He begins to reject blind privilege and recognize injustice, and when he returns home, the narrator notes that he looked different. His eyes held something else, something steely, defiant. She explains that he said nothing about the old man, and we knew he would not. This final moment shows his transformation and his solidarity with the prisoners of Cell 1, which has been established now as a place of transformation. Reading or writing about Cell 1, think carefully about what each space in the story reveals, not just about the characters, but about the world Adichie is critiquing. Whether it's the university, the family home, or the prison, each place says something about who has power and who is ignored, and it works on a symbolic and on a literal level. Use the narrator's perspective as your guide. She notices everything even when others don't listen. And if you can write like she observes, sharply, honestly, and with attention to detail, your analysis will stand out. Always bring it back to those big ideas about power, privilege, injustice, and resistance.